Let's get to some breaking economic news. The newly released GDP report says the real GDP increased at an annual rate of 2.9% for the fourth quarter of 2022.
Let's break it down with Investopedia editor-in-chief Caleb Silver. Caleb, good to be here. Good to have you with us. It's good for us to be here with you as well.
Good to be here too.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's been looking at these reports that come out and saying, what does it say about the economy? Does it mean a recession is more or less likely? What's your big takeaway? What were the weaknesses? What were the strengths?
Yeah, again, we're looking in the rearview mirror at the fourth quarter of last year, coming down from very hot inflation in the middle of the year. So 2.9%, that's kind of nice. Not too hot, not too cold, a little Goldilocks going on there. That's a more normalized rate of growth for the U.S. economy. And it shows that although it slipped from 3.2% in the third quarter, a decline in GDP, never a good thing, it's actually normalizing. And there are still pockets of strength in the economy, even though there is some weakness.
So the odds of a recession now, does this change anything?
Not really, because we have to look at all the components that go into a recession. And when you look at the areas of strength, private inventories grew, manufacturing grew, healthcare spending grew, spending on utilities, personal care grew. We were at the barber a little bit more. So we were spending as consumers, we were spending as businesses, but there was weakness from exports, and there was also weakness in other parts of the economy, like housing and retail spending.
How does inflation factor into this report? What are we to read into that?
It shows that we were spending because inflation was coming down. So when you look at the areas where we were spending as consumers, that was on services. We were traveling a lot in the fourth quarter of last year. We were spending on ourselves. Personal care was a big component here. But it also tells us that inflation is still high, and it's compressing things like the housing market. We weren't spending a lot on housing. We weren't buying a lot of houses last year. And, you know, when you buy a house, there's a lot more spending that comes after that. That wasn't happening aggressively in the fourth quarter. That may pick up this year.
I have a question about that, though, because you say we spend more in personal care. For me and personally, my budget, if I don't have as much, that's the first thing that goes. So how are we to read into that if we're spending more for eggs at the grocery store, but then we also have more for the barber, for example?
Yeah, some people won't let that go. That's the spending, the discretionary spending they just can't cancel. But also health care is a spend we can't avoid sometimes. So personal care also means spending on our health and spending on health care. And that was up in the last quarter, pretty strong. So yes, inflation made us maybe tighten our pocketbooks in some areas, but there are parts of spending, especially among consumers, that they're not willing to give up.
The headline here is hair is incredibly important.
My nails aren't done. I'm broke.
All right, so we know we're paying close attention to this. Obviously, the Federal Reserve is paying close attention to this. They meet next week. We're expecting another interest rate hike. But what does this tell us about what these hikes are going to look like next week and moving forward?
Yeah, the Federal Reserve has pretty much telegraphed, sent it to us in a wrapped up box saying they're going to raise interest rates 0.25% at the meeting next week. There may be another 0.25% increase in about 8 weeks from now. So we're slowing the pace of rate hikes and the size of rate hikes because the Fed sees this and says the economy is not going negative right now. It's slowing, and consumers continue to spend. The big wild card, the bogey here, is consumer spending. When consumers pull back on spending, that's 70% of U.S. GDP. That could send us into a deep recession. If we have one, it looks like it might be soft.
Help us also understand all of the company layoffs that we're seeing and how that factors into the general overall picture of the economy. I mean, Microsoft, Spotify, all these big tech layoffs. What are you going to be watching for the next couple of months?
Yeah, that's where the layoffs have been concentrated. We're calling it kind of a tech session because those are the job cuts, but those are also the companies in the areas of the economy where job growth was the strongest because there was so much demand in 2021 and the first part of 2022. They're cutting staff, but a lot of these companies employ hundreds of thousands of people. So 5–10%, it hurts if you're one of those people. But it's not that big when you consider the size of these companies. There's a lot of hiring in other parts of the economy, as you know.
All right, Caleb Silver, thanks so much for breaking it down for us. We appreciate it.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.